Greetings YouTube, this is DecKrash, better known as Brandon. So I'm going ahead and doing this all audio because, well, it's book time again. I guess before I start I want to go ahead and give this a little bit of background here. Me and a friend of mine, a couple of friends actually, are working on a webcomic. And it's going to be sort of a big epic trilogy that, sort of a big space opera epic trilogy type thing. And I've been having the idea sort of on the back burner. I've been working on it on and off over the years, and we're trying to make a big push for it now. While I was working on it, I did a few side projects based on aspects of the story. It's going to be sort of a, big, the human race settles into different planets, and you're going to have alien races and such. And what I did was I developed like an alien race and developed stories about humans in this future time and these alien races. And the way I do that is I write stories in order to build up the concept of the creatures and various things and even environments. And that's what I did right here. I wrote a story. Well, it intended it to be a short story. Unfortunately, none of my stories ever end up being short, except for one, which I actually got published. I'll put a link down in the doobly-doo for those of y'all who are interested. Now, here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna go ahead and read this story because this was really just some practice work that I was doing with by myself to build up the mythos. And I sincerely hope that those of y'all who listen to it, I'm not going to read the whole thing in one sitting. I'm going to read it piece by piece. I'm doing this as a test run to see if anyone else is interested in hearing more. So here's where you come in. If you like what you hear, this story it does have a beginning, middle, and an end. If you like this story, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and read more of it. And we're gonna go ahead and make this maybe a several parter to it. We get to the end. So, but you have to let me know if you like it, and also supply me with criticisms if at all possible over the story. Let me know what you think, if you think it needs work or whatnot. So before I start, I'm gonna apologize in advance because I do have a tendency to. Although I can do voices and such really well, when it comes to reading, sometimes I trip over my own words. I read fairly well, I just trip over my words sometimes. So I apologize for that in advance. So I'm going to go ahead and begin. I'm going to give you a little background of the story. The story is called Her Hand in Mine. It is about a person who falls in love with an alien. It's one of the alien races that exist in this particular story. There is some very interesting things that go on. It takes place only one planet in the story, so it's given me an opportunity to build up the story of this world. And one word of warning: there is sex in the story, but it is not graphic. I try to make it. It is a romantic story, and it is not graphic at all. Okay, so it's to set the romantic mood. I'm not trying to be smutty with it. So now that I've wasted about 4 minutes here, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So once again, without further ado, Her Hand in Mine. I would never have believed that on the day that Svana returned to my life, I would begin to die. It wasn't real death. No, my life was in no danger of ebbing away, but it was a death nonetheless. Slowly, irrevocably, the man that I was faded away bit by bit, becoming ever more stranger to Zinj, the planet of my birth. It was a death for which I am eternally grateful. Bit by bit I was reborn, free of my world's constraints, and came into possession of all that I ever needed. I became whole and complete, healed of a disease I never even knew I had. I saw the ship landing on the day it began, at the tail end of a dust storm that had my convoy grounded for a full hour. The craft was unmistakably Felian. I had seen them before in videos, but it had been years since I'd gotten to look at an actual one, 10 full years to be exact. It was just like I remembered, a tapered bullet with no visible gun or exhaust ports upon its shining surface. It possessed an almost organic sleekness that put even the most streamlined vessel from any of the colonies to shame. Its immaculate hull was glaringly incongruous against a bleak, windswept valley that had been pockmarked with ancient craters and curtained above by leaden clouds of poison. It landed without a sound upon the distant tarmac, and I stared, wondering what the occasion was, until the radio crackled the foreman's irate voice, shaking me unpleasantly from my reverie. "Hey, Galloway, you fell asleep out there or something? I said move! The slag ain't gonna haul itself!" And so it was back to business as usual. I hit the truck's throttle, and my job continued as it had since I had turned 16, hauling slag from the ruins of Old Valis, one of the millions of what remained of Zinja's surface cities, crushed by the Imperium Wars, and now only so much scrap metal on the convoy to the processor. I was a Class A halter, licensed to lead the convoys and operate the processor that purged the radiation and toxins from the slag, and separated it into its constituent parts to be shipped off-world. The scrap was the lifeblood of Zinj, the only reason why the planet still had a human population, and probably the only reason the Felians still dealt with us. Not that their help had been appreciated. Zinj had been one of the most populous of all the colonies before the wars, and so it would be centuries yet before we ran out of cities to scrap, possibly millennia. God only knew what would become of us then. For me, all that mattered was now. Only after work did I have time to truly be myself. But this was usually after Chester, my friend and co-worker, dragged me along to have a drink with him in the local pleasure house. Sure as sandstorms, he caught up with me after we got out of the decon room, still reeking of that salve they sprayed on you while buck naked. Realizing that I had been holding my old respirator through the entire process, I threw it into the recycler just as Chester came to my side and threw his arm around my neck. A bit of a feat considering how much larger and thicker of build I was compared to him. "Jules!" his shout echoed off the tiles in the dressing room. "Come, my friend, we party tonight." Ducking out of his impromptu embrace, I paused to give myself a cursory view at the mirror above the sink. I had dressed in fresh clothes in the chemical bath that wiped away all the toxic grime from me, but I was never what anyone would call handsome, even by the dubious standards of my people. My dirty blonde hair was always wild and unkempt. My face was a mask of conflicting features with its broad nose and incongruously soft-looking brown eyes set upon leathery skin, and my facial hair grew out to a simple 5 o'clock shadow, but no farther. Ironically, this rugged look did manage to attract a fair amount of unwanted attention from nearly every girl in the sector, a fact that Chester found amusing, much to my irritation. "What's the occasion?" I asked, satisfied that I could do much worse with how I looked. "What indeed?" The freckles upon my friend's ruddy face seemed even darker when he grinned this broadly. "Keisha's there, and she's been asking about you." I must have had quite a stupid look on my face when I saw how Chester returned my gaze. "Keisha?" "Yeah, Keisha, the Thursday night bartender." Chester was nonplussed while I stood there trying in vain to remember this person he was talking about. "The one who was hanging all over you last week? That Keisha?" "Oh, her." I fuzzily recalled the girl who would not leave my side last week, even when it had been evident that I was not interested in her. "I might have been drunk." "Yeah, that you were," Chester replied with nonchalance. "Why was that anyway?" "Because I wasn't exactly in a good mood last week. The slaves who we licensed to operate 2 of our trucks tried to make a run for it. Someone hacked the master controls, and so I couldn't shut the truck's systems off. I had to shoot their engines out and even shoot the slaves when they tried to run off on foot. It's not something I felt good about doing, so you can understand why I wasn't in the mood for women that day." "No wonder you're so mopey," Chester said after an elongated "oh" of realization. "And you hardly ever get drunk. Foreman chews you out?" "A little," I said, but he understood for the most part. He was actually more pissed about the trucks than about the slaves. "He did him a kindness is what I think," Chester said. I knew that he was attempting to be consoling, but he was falling rather short of the mark. It's not like there was anywhere to run to. Better they die from a bullet in the brain than from the respirators getting clogged with the toxic crap out there. "It's not very encouraging," I said. "It wasn't meant to be," Chester replied. "It's cold, hard reality. But after listening to your little sob story, I guess you deserved that stupor last week. That being said, you're never in the mood. So how's today for you?" "Not looking good either." I was not looking directly at him, but I heard him exhale with frustration. "And why not?" "My parents," I said. "Same spiel again?" "Always the same thing. They keep on bringing it up every time I visit. Hell, I can't get into a conversation with them without them bringing it up. I turned 21 and they expect me to climb into bed with the first unfixed girl that bats her eyes or shows her ass to me. These are one of the times I envy you, Chester. You're saying you want to be fixed if you had the choice? Sometimes I think I would. It's just your folks, Chester said dismissively. They're always hard up on responsibility. Give it some time, they'll settle down. Or maybe you'll find someone. Maybe, I said. But then I think I'd have issues with whoever I find. So is Keisha, Chester said, sounding hopeful. We'll see. I wasn't fooling Chester, though. My tone of voice was far less than enthusiastic, and he knew it. We hopped aboard the train that delivered us to New Vallis's red light sector, and chose the meeting room out of the branching pathways that connected to the Pleasure House's main corridor. We moved past several other couples who were exiting the meeting room entrance and heading hand in hand with their choice of partners for the private rooms down the other hallways, and shuffled into the noises of the meeting room's usual crowds, among the lights from the fluorescent lamps above and the hollows of news and the sports from the tanks. Chester went to the bar where I saw Keisha, her rounded face and large expressive amber eyes, framed by dark curls, clearing the remaining haze of drunken memory. She grinned broadly at me, and I managed a friendly wave, but not without a certain sense of foreboding. Realizing that I had just blown in conspicuousness, I went and plopped myself into one of the cloth sofas that surrounded the tank and was broadcasting reviews of the Gestalt tournaments on Saberna. Amidst highlight clips of the two hulking, mechanical juggernauts grappling the arena, commentators were reviewing yesterday's match between Ursa Major and Steel Dragon, the former a powerful and skilled mainstay of the tournaments and defending champion, the latter an upstart piloted by Alexa, a red-haired spitfire with the attitude the size of her impressively dragon-like Gestalt, its red metallic chassis as beautiful as it was deadly. Steel Dragon's a 5-7 bet to make the semifinals this year, said a familiar voice behind me after several minutes. Keisha's dark-skinned arm curled around me and into my field of vision, presenting a mojito to me. "Pa's a noob," I said, accepting the drink, somewhat surprised that she knew what I liked, and she plays dirty. "She's never done anything illegal yet," Chester said, reclining in the sofa catty-corner to mine. His hand was firmly grasping a bottle of Beauvoir-made beer. "Just dirty, like you said. Ripping out the cockpits is pretty low down, but there's nothing about it that's against the rules." "It should be," I said. "It's a punk-ass move." In my peripheral vision, I saw Keisha jump over the head of the sofa beside me and land bouncing in its cushioned seat, a flutter of color from the ribbons in her curly hair and the patchwork of earthen colors upon the blouse she wore over black jeans. She leaned into me, much to my dismay. It was always hard turning down a girl who flirted with me so obviously. It never went well. "Well, my money's on Steel Dragon," Chester remarked. "It's your money," I said with a casual shrug, despite my discomfort at having Keisha so close. "Hey, by the way, there was a Fellian ship landing outside. Got any idea what that's about?" "It's inspection time," Chester said. "They come by every 10 years to run maintenance over all the systems they installed. You didn't get the memo?" "Might have skimmed it," I lied. I hardly ever looked at the memos unless they had something directly to do with my department. Chester pursed his lips in that shrewd way that told me he knew that I was full of it. "By the way, what was it your parents were saying?" Inwardly I cringed. It was no coincidence that Chester had brought this subject up, which made things even more awkward than I wanted. "It's like I said, they keep pressuring me into finding a non-fixed girl. I'm only 21 and they keep reminding me of my sister." "Sister?" Keisha piped up. "You had a sister?" "Yeah," I said. "Her name was Francesca. She was unfixed too." "God, so lucky," Keisha said, smiling with ardent interest. 2 kids spared the lottery?" "Yeah, but she died," I said, watching Keisha's expression turn crestfallen as I dug up the still somewhat painful memory of the mining incident that buried and crushed her. "She was trying to have a baby before she died. I think Mom and Dad worry about the same thing happening to me. And they worry even more when I say that I have plenty of time." "You don't want to be a father?" Keisha asked, her brow furrowed over her doe eyes as she gazed at me with a look that bordered on dismay and pity. "No," I said, leaning to the side opposite Keisha, but catching her before she fell undignified into the sofa. I hefted her into an upright position as gracefully as I could. "No, it's not that. They're just pressuring me is all. I haven't really had a chance to play the field and, sow my wild oats." "Oh, okay," Keisha said, her voice dismal, disappointment visibly etched upon her face as she slumped forward in her seat. "Really, man?" Chester said, sitting upright in his sofa and fixing me with an incredulous glare. He gestured angrily but discreetly at Keisha. "What the hell?" "What?" I retorted. I wanted to say, whose fault is that, but I bit my tongue. I tried to speak to Keisha, but I had no idea what to say. No words came into my mind or in my mouth except for a pathetic, "Look, I'm sorry, okay? I just never felt ready for anything deep right now. Besides, well, aren't you working right now?" I did not need to glance over to Chester when I heard the painful "oh" come out from him. I frowned at my own words, knowing what they must have sounded like. "Yeah, I do have to work," Keisha said tersely, and then stood up and strode off without a single word more. "So are you born that smooth, or does it just take practice?" Chester said with a loud guffaw. And at that moment I wished I had not left my pistol in the weapons locker back at work. "So what's your deal anyway?" Chester asked, taking a long draught of his beer, emptying the bottle to a quarter full. In turn I sipped some of my mojito, but the happenings of a moment before took the joy out of the drink. I placed it heavily upon the table across from me. "What do you mean, what's my deal?" I said. "Jules, you had a smoking hot, unfixed girl right there. She was hot for you like nothing else, and you brushed her away." "Not on purpose," I protested. "I've known you since we were, 12, Chester said. "I've come to notice you have a way of accidentally doing things on purpose." "You set me up," I said. "No contest," Chester replied, and leaned forward, pointing his bottle at me. "I was trying to get your sorry ass get some ass." "What if I didn't want any ass?" Chester sat silent afterwards, eyeing me with an indecipherable look. "What?" I asked. "Well, your psych eval said you weren't gay." "I'm not," I said flatly through clenched teeth. "That was a joke," Chester said in an attempt at levity. "I'm not laughing." "I'm sorry, Jules, okay?" Chester held his palms out. "It's just that you can be a real mystery sometimes, you know that? I think your mom and dad see that mystery as well. I mean, think about it. When's the last time you were with a girl?" "Last year," I said, not skipping a beat. "Cheryl Althea, remember?" "Yeah, she slipped you something in your drink, you know. You were all over her like stink on a pig afterwards." "Yeah, but the point is that I paused, realizing what Chester had just said. "Wait, she did what?" "Yeah, I saw her. You turned down 10 girls at that party. Cheryl got sick of it. I guess you were going to get some birthday sex one way or the other. I've just been thankful that she was fixed." I had no words for the amount of disgust that filled me at Chester's words. At that moment I could barely look him in his freckled face without wanting to punch it. The mojito turned to urine in my mouth as my eyes narrowed. "Thanks," I said, my words dripping with the sarcasm I had fully intended. "Thanks a lot for the assistance." "Well, it's not like you were unhappy about it," Chester said. His words only served to fuel the already seething anger in my stomach into a full blaze. "I wasn't in my right freaking mind!" "Jules, you hardly ever show any interest in girls," Chester said. "Are you even aware of that? It's not normal, man. You needed it." "Like hell I did!" I shot out of the seat, ready to step over to Chester and leave him with a black eye and possibly a bloody nose. But my better judgment took over. Violence was strictly forbidden in pleasure houses, and neither I nor Chester had any desire to be kicked out and banned. Instead, mojito in hand, I stalked over to Chester and leaned forward, hovering above his sofa and looking him square in his green eyes, which were wide with surprise and borderline fear. "Listen here, Chester Bolin." I rarely ever used Chester's full name unless extremely drunk or extremely angry, and my disposition was far into the latter. My words were quiet and exact. "I'll choose to mate with who I want on my own terms. It shouldn't matter to you if I stay celibate. I want to screw everything with 2 legs and 2 X chromosomes. I'll take a girl for pleasure when I want, and I'll fulfill my civic duty when I'm damn good and ready. Got it?" Not waiting for an answer, I took a big swallow of my mojito, coughing against the ground mint leaves that stuck in the back of my throat, and slammed the near empty glass onto the table before storming out of the pleasure house. All that frustration had me wound up tighter than I thought possible, and my drink had failed to relax me. I stopped by my home, slamming the door behind me as I fetched my belt of tools. I lived alone. It was a luxury afforded my class, as the unfixed were expected to start families. Everyone else, rendered infertile by the common draw of our lottery at birth, like Chester, lived in communal lodgings with private areas for quality time. I removed the tiny scraps of copper, iron, cement, and stone that I pilfered off of the day's collection of slag from my pockets. They were still wet from the pure anti-contaminant gel I kept in the decon room as I placed them in the lead coffer on my workshop table with the rest of my collection of raw materials. Carefully, I locked it with the key that I kept beneath the short leg of the table and placed it atop my filing cabinet. Making sure that I had enough raw materials stored away in my bag's secret compartment, I hurried off to my workplace. The Fellions had already begun to arrive. doing their work here and there. They passed me by in the corridors, moving in pairs that consisted of two of the three subspecies, or Kya, of their race. Ankylophelians looked almost human, but with striped patterns on their skin, hair that had a tousled, almost wild look about it, and a whip-like furry tail that grew from the base of their spines. Harakylophelians looked simply like animals that had just recently learned to stand erect. Not quite cat-like or dog-like, they were covered with shaggy brown fur with the same striped patterns on Ankylophelian skin, moving on all fours when they walked and standing upright when they guarded their respective partners. The Ankylophelians wore a uniform of blue tunic and pants with a leather tool belt at their waist and feet that were clad in sandals. The Harakylophelians wore little clothing, save a loincloth and a wide leather belt, where a vicious-looking knife was sheathed. They stood beside the Ankylophelians, who worked on pipes, environmental controls, and communication terminals, casting hawkish glares at everyone who passed. I remembered my mother complaining that the guards were there as an assurance. I remember my mother explaining that the guards were there as an assurance that humans would not pry too deeply into their technology, which comprised most of the workings of their city's habitats. We were allowed to operate them, but only Felians could repair or upgrade any of it. Knowing from childhood that the technicians and their guards made poor conversationalists, I left them to their work. I rarely ever did my artwork at home. It was too quiet, and my tools made a great deal of noise, which would disturb the neighbors, who lived close. Instead, I took an elevator down to the lowest levels of the city to a place miles below the farthest reaches of the pollutants that leached into the soil. I could feel the arboretum's humidity before I arrived, and the elevator doors opened to the sound of running water, and the sight of trees, shrubs, and grasses and flowers forming a verdant canopy over a pebble-strewn path. The sense of green life invigorated me as I made my way to my favorite spot. Beams of artificial sunlight broke intermittently through the tree boughs, and I heard the sounds of squirrels and birds leaping and singing among the quiet branches. My spot was secluded in one of the deepest reaches of the arboretum, far away from the main traffic of the pathways, and in a place where all the noise of my work was drowned out by the woods and the waterfall from the reclamation plant in the levels above. It was a spot so obscured by bushes and undergrowth that even lovers looking for a spot for a tryst did not know of it. I moved away from the path and brushed through the forest, letting memory and the sound of the waterfall guide me until I broke through the last wall of green. I froze instantly as I saw that I was not alone there. Someone was sitting upon the sole bench in that clearing, surrounded by my unfinished projects, figurines, trinkets, and jewelry that I had run out of raw materials for. 1,000 questions ran through my mind, chief among which was how I would talk my way out of what could be a very dangerous situation. No regular citizen had access to materials such as the ones I used. Would I have to buy the person's silence? Could that person even be bought? And then I relaxed in equally sudden relief as I realized that the shape and colors of the intruder were decidedly not human. What would a Felian be doing here? I said to myself in a low voice. As I approached the stranger from behind, my fear had now been replaced with a sense of cautious curiosity. I could first see that it was female, and a Reykjavelian at that. I figured that much from the clothing and the length and the embroidery in her long black hair, as well as the gray fur with black stripes that ran down her body, well groomed and not at all shaggy like those of Harakylophelians. Males of any Felian Kya did not embroider their hair. Also, Felian clothing was not terribly different from human clothing. It was just that female Reykjavelians tended to wear less of it. Her apparel was a green wraparound tunic that covered only her top and shoulders, and a thin black dress clasped upon a ring that dangled from the brown leather belt that encircled her hips. Like most Felians, she was barefoot, not that she needed shoes with the padded soles of her feet. I watched as her long tail twitched with keen interest at something that she was regarding closely. The Felian's long, furry, tapered ears quirked, and she stiffened, and I knew that she'd heard me. I saw her place the trinket she had been studying, a copper bracelet with intricate etchings, upon the bench as she stood and dusted off her dress. The way she did this sparked off a sudden glimmer of recognition, but I could not exactly place it until she turned fully around. The image of a child's face struck my mind as I saw her. It was more rounded than what looked at me now, but with the same bright, expressive violet eyes that framed her elegant muzzle, which was banded by 2 horizontal stripes. Her hair framed her face like twin curtains, accentuating the graceful curve of her ears. She blinked once, slowly, as if I had been previously invisible, and had just appeared before her like a ghost. At that moment, the child's image overlapped itself upon the Felian's face, and recognition awakened within me. Vani? I whispered the nickname I had for her, a name that I had not said in a decade. Svana? Jules? She spoke my name as if it had been a long time since she had spoken English, with a voice that was as quiet and filled with as much trepidation as mine had been. I don't think I could have stopped my smile if I wanted to, and on the next heartbeat, I saw the same smile break onto her face. Before I could even think, we rushed into each other's arms, laughing and speaking over each other with our enthusiastic, "How have you been?" and "I haven't seen you in so long." Somewhere in the middle of it all, we separated from the embrace, but Svana still clasped my arms and was hopping up and down excitedly as if she had not grown up since I had last seen her. I think she embarrassed herself doing this, as she stopped quickly and turned away, her laugh now sheepish and self-deprecating. "Oh, it's been too long, Jules," Svana said as she had recovered. She was grinning from ear to furry ear, and she leaned forward once again and nuzzled my cheek with her own. This was a common greeting among Felians, and she had done it to me countless times when we were children. But something happened this time that had never happened before. A gentle purr began to rumble from her inner throat. It was a soft, soothing noise, and not at all unpleasant. But I saw quickly enough that this also flustered her as she quickly pulled away from me and gasped. Seeing my confused expression, she somewhat regained her composure, perhaps realizing that I didn't understand the reason for her embarrassment. Still, her grin remained somewhat sheepish, and she muttered a soft, "Sorry." "For what?" I said. "Never mind," Svana shook her head. "It's a Felian thing." I had accepted her explanation, though I had no idea what she meant by it. Her English, I realized, was actually much better than I remembered it being. She spoke unsurprisingly with a Tintagel accent, a dialect with more rounded vowels than was common on my world. It had been popular in the days of the Old Imperium, and Reykjavelians seemed to embrace it over all other dialects, making them sound like the ruling caste they were in Felian culture. "The ship was your father's?" I asked in delight, and she nodded. "Then I should have known that you'd be the one to find me here," I said. "You really made my day today." "You don't remember who helped you to find it?" Svana asked. Now it was my turn to be embarrassed, and Svana giggled at my expression. "I saw the ship earlier today," I said, causing the conversation to take a slight detour. "If I had known it was your dad's ship, I would have gone out to the spaceport to meet you." "That's sort of my fault." Svana traced a line in the grass with a back and forth motion of her finely manicured toes. "Father wanted me to call you when we got into orbit, but I wanted it to be a surprise." "Well, you sure succeeded at that," I said, "and it couldn't have been more pleasant." "You've grown a lot, you know," Svana said Svana's hand, with its tiny claws trimmed as immaculately as her toes, went to my face, touching the bristles of my almost beard. "And you've gotten hairier since we last met. Are you trying to look like us?" "Only if you want me to," I joked. Svana glanced at my arms appraisingly, her almost as hairy as my face. "Well, you seem well on the way." "Good thing or bad thing?" "Depends on who you ask." An amused chuckle escaped my stomach at Svana's coy remark. "I've seen you've grown a lot too," I said. We had been about the same height as children, and about the same age as well, as Felians aged at the same rate as humans, but lived just a little bit longer. Now Svana, though shorter than me, most Felian females were, had grown into a truly lovely specimen of her kind. I had forgotten that they grew in the chest as human girls did, and in this avenue Svana had become quite ample. "But on the whole, you're just like I remembered you." I held back on saying more, even though I thought that she was quite beautiful, by Felian standards at least. I didn't want to give her the wrong idea, nor did I want to say something that I would later regret. She was Felian, I was human. It never would have worked out. Still, she seemed impressed by my compliment as her hand slipped gently into mine. "Hey, this place is nice and all, but you know what I really want to see?" she asked. "What would that be?" I felt a strange yet thrilling warmth move up my hand and to my arm and to my shoulder at that touch. "You remember the skylight at the top of the dome? Is it still there?" "Last time I checked," I said. I should have figured she would want to go there, to one of our favorite spots. "Want to see it?" Svana gasped excitedly. The grin on her gray-white muzzle was a funny sight indeed, almost like when a dog or cat smiles at you, but oddly more human-looking. The whole thing bordered on cute, and I fought back the urge to laugh. "Please, can we?" she said, sounding very much like a little girl I remembered. "Do you remember the way?" I asked, walking ahead of her, my hand still clasped with hers. "They've dug a few more tunnels beneath the dome since you left." "If I can find my way down here, then I can find my way to the dome," Svana said, following me back through the woods into the elevator. I felt my stomach knot somewhat as we passed a few couples who had just recently arrived. Seeing our conjoined hands, they fixed me with gazes that ranged from incredulous to downright baleful. But I was unable to let go of Svana. As in her excitement, she quickly moved ahead of me and took the lead, running with me towards the elevator, brushing past each couple, oblivious to their stares. Once inside the elevator, I discreetly slipped my hand out of her grip, unable to help feeling some shame at doing this. We were no longer in public, and I realized, much to my surprise, that I felt more comfortable with my hand in hers. But in the presence of my own people, I tended to maintain a certain decorum. Chester's catastrophic attempts at playing Cupid were bad enough, but would be nothing compared to what might happen if people got the wrong idea about me and Svana. In the elevator, I glanced her way and felt myself overcome by a distinctive sadness. The Felians were the only reason why there were humans still on Zinj. After the Imperium Wars, their technology was the only means by which this toxic planet still had any life at all. It was well known that some humans on the other colonies took Felian mates, but these were Anka Felians. My people, my family and closest friends wrinkled their noses in disgust at even this. I shuddered to think how they would react to a human that took a Reykja Felian mate, or even appeared to hold an interest in one that was deeper than simply platonic. "You're quiet," I heard Svana say. "Sorry, had a lot on my mind." It was not a lie, but it was also the only thing I could think to say at the moment. Her sudden reappearance in my life had quite thoroughly left my head spinning. "You really have changed," Svana said. "You used to prattle on and on about anything and everything every time you talked. Of course, you were learning Felian from me at the time, and were trying to practice." "I still remember it," I said. "Well, some of it at least." "You stopped studying it?" Noticing her disappointment made me somewhat chagrined. "There really wasn't any reason to keep learning," I said. "No Felians ever came back here after the group left." Then, out of some strange desire to impress her, I switched to my very rusty Felian. "I speak it well or well enough, methink," I said. "You're right, you do, for someone who's been out of practice for 10 years, Svana said, impressed at the same time amused. I had no doubt butchered the language horribly, but she clearly appreciated my efforts. I had used this particular elevator car countless times, and nothing about it ever had been nostalgic, but Svana's presence with me was beginning to bring fond recollections to mind. It was vague and fuzzy, as some childhood memories are, but happy, or at least partly so. I was in the same elevator car with Svana, and running like mad round and round trying to tell her in Felian about hawks, and how I saw one flying in circles above the canopy in the arboretum, right below the sun lamps. I had her laughing hysterically until the door opened for another passenger. I don't remember who it was, but I recalled how she stared down her nose at us with the most disdainful look you could imagine. It was an expression that unnerved us to silence after she disembarked. The elevator stopped and opened up to a long corridor of red stone with no doors and only a series of fluorescent lamps above to light our way. The stale, acrid smell of the nearby toxins in the soil was the first sign that we were fairly close to the surface. At the tunnel's end was the door to the elevator that lay inside the massive main support column of the dome. Its interior was glass, which added an aesthetic view of the city in all its glory. A latticework of light upon geometric structures of steel and car, a Felian material that was stronger than concrete, and in its early stages more malleable than putty for easy application. It all stood against the dim backdrop of the solid gray of the dome and the dimmed sun lamps upon its interior, which replicated light. But we came to see a real night. Silent with expectation, Svana stood beside me as the elevator rose to the top, towards the skylight level. It opened to one final short corridor, with slots that contained emergency respirators right beside the final door. We opened the door, and Svana stepped out onto the platform, her wide eyes gazing transfixed upon the sight before her. "It's so beautiful," she said after a long time. I had to agree as I watched the auroras rippling before us in the starry sky. For a world as inhospitable to life as Zinj, the radiation in the atmosphere caused some of the most spectacular nighttime vistas when the conditions were right. Tonight was such a night. High above the scarred, blasted, windswept plain, the unusually clear night sky was a symphony of light, with massive curtains of iridescence firing against a backdrop of countless stars. The 3 moons were full tonight, bright and serene, Even the dead and shattered moons seemed less tomb-like in the midst of the electromagnetic symphony. It's something to be said about an environment that can kill you in less than 10 minutes, I remarked, just as taken with the view as I had always been. It gave me even more of a thrill now since I had someone to watch it with. People hardly ever came up here. No idea why, but its solitude was something I had always cherished. For me it would be an hour, Svana said, at last shifting her gaze from the fiery sky to me. I began to feel hot and flustered with embarrassment before I mustered the words that shaped my thoughts. Oh, right, I finally said, remembering that Felians had a stronger resistance to toxins and radiation than humans. Would you believe that I forgot how much you liked this place? I remember the first time she had seen it. I sat there upon the railing and watched her stare, wide-eyed and slack-jawed, utterly paralyzed at the sight of it, like a cat staring at a string dangling against its nose before pouncing. She stared until I started to laugh. I think I upset her when I did that, but that didn't stop her from asking to come back to this place whenever I could find time and the weather was right. It seemed that you liked it as well, Svana said. How do you know that? I asked, and she gestured towards the bench on the left, beneath which another coffer lay, filled with more of my unfinished artwork, tucked discreetly away in a heavily shadowed place. You would never know it was there unless you were looking for it. I began to ask about how she knew about it when she touched her tiny pink nose. Your scent is all over the place here, and I can smell the materials in your artwork. Wow, I said. Your sense of smell wasn't that keen when we were kids. We grow into it. Hope I don't stink, I said, her comment having stricken me abruptly with a distinct sense of self-consciousness. No, you don't. I felt her hand, furry and soft, with a velvet palm touch my own. She bent forward and pressed her nose gently upon my arm, and my head swam. I steeled myself, reminding myself of how this was normal for Felians, how they were, as a race, quite touchy-feely, but with no underlying intent. I felt her inhale and exhale upon my skin, tickling the hairs on my forearm. You smell just fine, she said, letting my hand slip out of her own. Not quite like I remember, and yet just the same. I guess that's a good thing, I asked. Svana smiled. Oh, it is. With more trouble than before, I shifted my gaze back to the skylight, steadying myself, my mind reeling after what she had done. I shook myself free of the misinterpretation of her actions, and what I would soon realize was a growing conflict within myself. This happened during a silence that weighed upon us rather uncomfortably. At last I stole a glance at her, after spending an embarrassing amount of time staring at how this dress split at her thigh, revealing a white half stocking that covered the gray stripes of her upper thigh to her upper calf. I forced my eyes to move further down. That was when I noticed the anklet. A wave of emotion passed over me at the bittersweet memory, erasing my previous discomfort. The Felians had completed their work and Svana had to leave. My dad had given me a small supply of copper he'd swiped from the mining site, and I impressed even myself by weaving an anklet. I gave it to Svana as a gift the day before she had to leave. To see it there, still upon her ankle, still in perfect shape, was something that touched me in a way that I was completely at a loss to describe. God, you still have it, Vani, I said in a soft, excited breath. I knelt to her leg and examined the anklet, glancing up to see Svana's expression change from confused to pleased. Of course I do, she said. It was your last gift to me. I guess it'd be kind of stupid for me to think that it wouldn't mean so much to you, I said, feeling quite stupid indeed. Svana shifted her foot to Tiptoe's position, and the anklet shifted accordingly. Yes, I think it would be, she said, and giggled. It was a sweet and musical thing. But I forgive you. It's bigger than I made it, I observed aloud. Svana laughed. Of course it is, Jules. I had to have it adjusted as I grew. I nodded, understanding. Good thing copper is such an easily moldable metal, I said, and rose to my feet. You had it done on the homeworld? That and other places, Svana asked. Jewelers are pretty common wherever you go. What's it like? I asked. Making jewelry? I snorted a loud guffaw, realizing what I said must have sounded. No, I mean your homeworld. What's it like there? Oh, Svana smiled again. What brought that on? Curiosity, I shrugged. The tables are turned then, as humans said, Svana remarked, leaning against the railing beside the skylight. What's that supposed to mean? As I recall, I was curious when we were little, Svana said. Zinj was my first time living around humans. I settled myself next to Svana. Well, I know that it's certainly a lot different from Anrahara. This place is nothing like Anrahara, Svana said with a sincerity that had taken me aback at first. On my world, we have forests that cover almost the entire planet, not stuck in holes miles beneath the surface. Nowhere does it look like this. She gestured almost dismissively to the ravaged, barren landscape below the kaleidoscopic sky. And our forests aren't like the forests you see in movies, news reports, and such either. Those are wild. The forests of my home are tamed. Tamed? The forests are our natural home, she explained. So we've been able to breed trees that grow into homes for us. And we can also grow our homes into already existing trees. I had seen pictures of Felian homes. I remembered that they always had struck me as odd-looking, a bit too organic. But to learn that the Felians actually grew them was something else entirely. And suddenly I was jealous. Does the sky glow? I asked, feeling the need to find something of Zinj that could compete with the natural glories of Svana's home. No, she glanced toward the vista of the skylight and sighed, but with unabated wonder rather than frustration. The sky doesn't glow. Feeling vindicated, I listened on as Svana continued to describe the beauty of her homeworld in a level of detail that I had not expected from her kind. Few videos or pictures of Anrahara existed, and those were limited to the barest of readouts and censored by the Felian government. I saw the planet as it looked from space, the continents and the major cities the images showed, as well as a few choice areas of the planet, but that was the extent of what humanity knew. All others deeper in the know lived on Anrahara, or in one of its inner system colonies, and did not say much. Listening to Svana, the entire planet came alive in a way that scant videos and pics could never match with. We talked for hours as she shared every detail she knew, and I was her captive audience. Only when I saw her yawn did I suggest she stop. Yes, it is getting late, I guess, she said in grudging acquiescence. I'm sorry, Vani, I said, feeling like something of a killjoy. I didn't want you to exhaust yourself. I was just concerned. It's also been a long day for us both. Oh, no, it's quite all right, she said understandingly. You're right, I am feeling rather tired. And tomorrow's a new day. She cast one last wistful look into the faded auroras. Another dust storm was about to blow in, and the miasma of clouds was beginning to obscure the night sky, as if the heavens were suggesting that we part ways for now. Will you be available tomorrow? I don't know why I half expected her to be gone by then, knowing what Chester had told me, but I felt another electric thrill at being able to see my friend again, knowing that she would be there tomorrow and this reunion had not been a dream. I smiled at her question. I'm off tomorrow, I said, so yes. Svana pushed herself away from the railing and then turned and nuzzled my face again, this time without a purr. Then I shall see you again tomorrow, she said. You know, I'm glad to see that you're still here. I was worried that something might have happened to me at first. Of course not, I replied with mock bravado. Why would I upset you by being dead? Svana gave a snort. There was a curious look upon her face. You really haven't changed a bit, she said. Good thing or bad thing? Yes. We both laughed. No, she said afterwards, turning and heading towards the elevator. That's fine, I said. Not only had there been a long pause before my answer, but my voice trailed off to an almost subvocal level. It was most likely because I was momentarily hypnotized by the sight of her tail. It switched back and forth when we walked, and I was captivated by its swirling patterns of black upon gray as one is transfixed by a dancing flame. Svana paused and turned to face me, her tail sweeping back behind her and knocking me from my stupor. What did you say? Realizing what had happened, I flustered, inwardly slapping myself for such behavior. I said that noon's fine. Okay, Svana said with a giggling edge to her voice. She cast a knowing grin my way, which was met with a puzzled expression from me. Again she giggled and sauntered off. In the arboretum, I hurriedly added. I swallowed hard as Svana's tail mesmerized me once again. The skylight area tends to get a little hot during the day. The elevator door opened and Svana stepped inside. The arboretum it is, then. Good night, I said as the door closed, and I caught the sight of her waving goodbye as we were separated by steel and plastic. Okay, that went on a little bit longer than I wanted, but that ends the first part. Once again, I hope you enjoyed it, first of all, and once again, I hope I get some comments and suggestions and critiques if at all possible. And if you want to hear more, let me know, because if not, then that'll be it. But I really will hope that this will get some people interested in the story. I would love to tell more. And please, and once again, I'm sorry about the screwing up of the story on a few areas there. I do tend to trip over my own words sometimes, although I have to admit I did a better job reading that than I did my other things. So, I think that's it for now. Like I said, let me know what you think down in the doobly-doo. I really ask you guys for some input. So, until next time, guys, this is DecKrash, better known as Brandon. As always, stay lucky and stay blessed.